The stars shone like tiny diamonds against the black canvas of space as Jack Harris stood on the observation deck of the Alliance ship Horizon. His broad shoulders carried the weight of his uniform with pride despite the scars beneath it from years of conflict. Jack never planned to be a hero. He simply joined the military to escape his small hometown and see the galaxy. Beyond the glass stretched the remains of a battle. Twisted metal and broken ships drifted silently. The Alliance forces had won against the Krell Empire, but at great cost. The Krell were known across the galaxy as cruel masters who enslaved other species and stripped planets of resources without care for the consequences. Jack received new orders on his comm device: cleanup and rescue operations. His team was assigned to check a damaged Krell transport ship for survivors. The mission was classified as low risk, but Jack knew better than to trust such designations. He had seen too many good soldiers die on supposedly safe missions. He made his way to the shuttle bay where his team waited. Sam Kelly, his second-in-command, nodded as Jack approached. Sam was a good soldier, quiet and efficient. They had served together for 3 years now and trusted each other with their lives. Beside Sam stood Olivia Wright, the team medic. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun and her eyes showed the weariness they all felt after the battle. 4 hours later, Jack floated through the silent corridors of the enemy vessel. His team had split up to cover more ground. The air was thin inside his helmet as he moved deeper into the ship, passing broken machinery and bodies of Krell soldiers. The Krell were massive creatures with thick armor like skin and multiple limbs. Even in death they looked fearsome. A faint sound caught his attention. Something moved behind a damaged door. He raised his weapon ready for an attack, but what he found instead changed everything. In a small holding cell huddled a figure with pale, blue skin and large almond-shaped eyes. She looked up at Jack, her delicate features showing both fear and hope. Her wrists bore the marks of restraints, and her thin body showed signs of poor treatment. Her clothing was little more than rags, but she held herself with dignity. The alien woman was Lyra, a Nalari whose homeworld had been conquered by the Krell 5 years ago. She had been captured and forced to serve as a translator due to her natural gift for languages. The Nalari were known for their intelligence and artistic culture before the Krell invasion. Now they were scattered across the galaxy, many living as refugees or slaves. Jack lowered his weapon and approached slowly. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. He spoke softly, telling her he meant no harm. Lyra understood his words but hesitated to trust him. Her people had suffered greatly at the hands of those who claimed to come in peace. With gentle movements, Jack offered her water from his pack. She accepted. With trembling hands, her large eyes studied his face as she drank. She had heard stories of humans but never met one. Their reputation among the stars was mixed. Some called them violent and unpredictable. Others spoke of their compassion and determination. Jack called his team, reporting that he found a survivor. The Nalari would need medical attention and safe transport to Alliance territory. As he waited, he noticed strange symbols etched into the cell walls. Lyra saw his interest and explained they were poems, memories of her home written during her captivity. Jack could not read the flowing script, but he understood the need to remember what was lost. Lyra slowly began to speak. Her voice was musical, with an accent that made simple words sound like poetry. She told Jack about her home, the floating cities of Nalar, and how the Krell had destroyed everything she loved. Her family had been separated during the invasion. She had not seen her younger sister or parents since that terrible day. Something in her story touched Jack. He had seen too much death, too much cruelty. The war had hardened him, but not completely. In this fragile alien woman, he recognized a strength that matched his own. She had endured and survived. Sam arrived at the cell doorway and raised his eyebrows at the scene. Jack helped Lyra to her feet, explaining they would take her somewhere safe. The ship groaned around them, a reminder that they needed to leave quickly. The damaged Krell vessel was becoming unstable. The journey back to their shuttle was slow. Lyra was weak from poor treatment and lack of proper nutrition. Jack supported her, his arm around her slender waist. Sam led the way, weapon ready for any surprises. Olivia joined them halfway, communicating with the Horizon to prepare for a civilian refugee. When medical transport arrived, Lyra refused to leave with anyone but Jack. She clung to his arm, her eyes wide with panic. He promised to stay with her. The medical officer shrugged and allowed Jack to accompany her to the horizon. The medical bay was bright and clean, a stark contrast to the dark cell where Lyra had been imprisoned. Doctors of various species moved efficiently between beds, treating wounded Alliance soldiers. Olivia helped Lyra onto an examination table and began scanning her with medical equipment. Jack stood nearby watching as Lyra answered the medical team's questions. Her knowledge of multiple languages impressed the staff. She spoke not only the common Alliance language but several regional dialects as well. Despite her physical weakness, her mind remained sharp. The chief medical officer, a stern woman named Linda Patel, approached Jack while Lyra was being treated. She asked about the rescue and conditions on the Krell ship Jack provided the details while keeping an eye on Lyra. He felt strangely protective of her. Though they had just met, he sensed she had few allies in this vast galaxy. Days passed as Lyra recovered in the medical bay of the Alliance ship Jack visited whenever his duties allowed. He brought her small gifts, Earth foods, Alliance books, anything to make her smile. She was curious about everything human, especially Jack. She asked endless questions about his home, his family, his life before the stars. For Jack, these visits became important. They reminded him why he fought not just for humanity but for all free beings in the galaxy. Lyra represented everything worth protecting. One evening, as Jack entered the medical bay, he found Lyra sitting on the edge of her bed. Her health had improved greatly under proper care. Her blue skin glowed with renewed vitality and her eyes sparkled when she saw him. She wore standard Alliance civilian clothing, but somehow made the simple outfit look elegant. Jack sat beside her and shared news from around the ship. The war continued on multiple fronts. The Alliance was pushing back against Krell forces, but victory remained uncertain. Lyra listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about strategy and politics. Her understanding of galactic affairs surprised Jack. She explained that as a translator she had been forced to attend many high-level Krell meetings. Her knowledge could be valuable to Alliance intelligence. As they talked, Lyra gradually moved closer to Jack until their shoulders touched. The contact was slight, but Jack felt it intensely. He had avoided personal connections since losing his family during the early days of the war. The pain of attachment seemed too great a risk. But Lyra slipped past his defenses with her gentle questions and musical laugh. Jack told her about growing up on a farm in the Midwestern United States on Earth. He described golden wheat fields and summer thunderstorms. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to imagine a world so different from her own. She shared memories of Nalar with its crystal towers and rainbow mists. Though their worlds were vastly different, they found common ground in simple pleasures. Family traditions and childhood dreams. Alliance officials decided Lyra would be transported to a refugee colony where other Nalari lived. Jack received new orders. He would be reassigned to the front lines. The war with the Krell continued. Despite this victory, they had only 2 more days together before their paths would diverge. The next morning, Jack introduced Lyra to Sam and Olivia over breakfast in the ship cafeteria. At first, Lyra was quiet, shy among strangers, but Olivia's friendly questions about Nalari culture soon had her talking animatedly. Her hands moved gracefully as she described traditional dances from her homeworld. Sam, usually reserved, smiled at her enthusiasm. Jack watched his friends and Lyra interact, feeling a strange mix of joy and sadness. Later that day, Jack showed Lyra the observation deck where he had stood after the battle. It seemed fitting to bring their story full circle. Here they could see both the stars and the remains of the conflict that had brought them together. Lyra pressed her hand against the glass, her expression solemn as she viewed the destruction. They stood in silence for a long moment before Lyra spoke softly. "My people believe that the universe has patterns," she said, "paths that cross for a reason." Jack nodded, though he had never been one, for philosophy or fate. Yet meeting Lyra amid such chaos seemed more than random chance. That evening they shared a meal in a quiet corner of the cafeteria. Jack had arranged for the kitchen to prepare something similar to Nalari cuisine. It wasn't perfect, but Lyra appreciated the gesture. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she thanked him. Small kindnesses had become rare in her life since the invasion. As they finished eating, Lyra reached across the table and placed her hand over Jack's. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, a reminder of her alien nature. Yet the gesture was universal connection, understanding. Perhaps even something more. The night before, they would part ways. Jack visited Lyra one last time. She sensed something was wrong before he spoke. The connection between them had grown stronger than either expected. Her large eyes filled with tears as he explained his new assignment. The morning of departure came too quickly. Jack stood in the shuttle bay watching as refugees and reassigned personnel boarded the transport vessel. Lyra stood among them, her few possessions in a small Alliance issue bag. She looked different today. Her blue skin seemed to glow with renewed health, and her long silver hair was braided in a traditional Nalari style. She had explained to Jack that, among her people, hair arrangements carried meaning. This particular style represented new beginnings. Jack approached her feeling strangely nervous. His uniform suddenly seemed too tight across his broad shoulders. Lyra smiled when she saw him. The expression transformed her alien features, making her look almost human, despite her blue skin and large eyes. They stood facing each other, awkward in the busy shuttle bay around them. Words seemed inadequate. Jack had faced Krell warriors without flinching, but saying goodbye to this woman he barely knew, yet somehow understood completely, left him speechless. Lyra solved the problem by stepping forward and embracing him. Her arms wrapped around his waist and her head rested against his chest. For a moment Jack stood frozen. Then slowly he returned the embrace, careful of his strength. Her body felt fragile against his, but he knew her spirit was stronger than steel. When they separated, Lyra looked up at him. "I will watch for you among the stars," she said. Her voice carried the musical quality of her native language even when speaking the Alliance common tongue. Jack nodded, unable to trust his voice. He had made his request for transfer but had little hope it would be granted. The call for final boarding echoed through the shuttle bay. Lyra stepped back, reluctance clear in her movements. She reached into her bag and removed something small and glittering, a crystal pendant on a slender chain. She pressed it into Jack's hand. "This is a memory stone," she explained. "It holds images of my homeworld. Look into it when you wish to remember." Jack closed his fingers around the gift, knowing its value to someone who had lost everything. It was more than a trinket. It was a piece of her past, her trust, given physical form. He removed his Alliance insignia pin from his collar and placed it in her palm. "Something to remember Earth," he said simply. With a final touch of hands, Lyra turned and boarded the transport. Jack watched until the shuttle doors closed, then remained in the bay as the vessel departed. He stood alone as the transport grew smaller, against the backdrop of stars, then disappeared into the vastness of space. 2 weeks passed in a blur of duties. Jack threw himself into his work, taking extra shifts, volunteering for the most dangerous missions. His team noticed the change. Sam confronted him in the training room after watching Jack punish a practice dummy with unusual ferocity. "You're going to get yourself killed," Sam said bluntly. Jack merely shrugged and continued his exercise. Olivia tried a gentler approach, bringing Jack a message that had arrived for him from the refugee colony. A short video from Lyra showed her new quarters and introduced other Nalari who had welcomed her. She looked happy, but her eyes held questions when she mentioned hoping to hear from him. Soon Jack recorded a response that night, sitting awkwardly in front of the communication terminal. He described recent missions, carefully editing out the danger. He asked about her life in the colony, and ended with a promise to send another message soon. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was all he could offer from across the stars. The war intensified as the Krell launched a counteroffensive. Alliance forces scrambled to respond. Jack and his team were deployed to a contested planet in the Orion sector. The mission was simple in theory: hold a strategic position until reinforcements arrived. The reality proved far more challenging. For 6 days they fought alongside a small Alliance garrison. Their position, a former mining facility, provided Some shelter, but Krell forces pressed closer each day. Jack led defensive efforts coordinating with the garrison commander, Major Lily Foster, a seasoned officer with a reputation for never leaving soldiers behind. On the 7th day, Krell forces breached their outer defenses. Jack ordered Sam to lead civilian workers to the emergency bunkers, while he and Olivia covered their retreat. The fighting was intense, hand-to-hand in some corridors. Jack moved on instinct, years of training taking over as he fought to protect his team. A Krell warrior twice his size charged Jack, knocking him against a wall. The impact drove the air from his lungs, but he managed to raise his weapon, firing at point-blank range. The Krell fell, but not before. Its clawed hand slashed across Jack's side, tearing through his armor and into flesh. Olivia found him moments later, bleeding heavily. She dragged him to cover, applying emergency medical treatment. Her face grim as she worked. Jack felt coldness spreading through his body and knew it was bad. The Krell sometimes used poison on their weapons. He tried to speak to tell Olivia to leave him, but darkness claimed him before he could form the words. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of movement, voices pain, then blessed numbness. He dreamed of blue skin and silver hair, of almond-shaped eyes filled with tears. He heard a musical voice calling his name from across the galaxy, begging him to hold on. When he finally woke properly, he lay in a medical bay on an Alliance cruiser. Tubes and monitors connected to his body. The steady beep of equipment told him he was alive, though the pain in his side when he tried to move suggested it had been a close thing. Major Foster stood at his bedside, reading a report. She noticed his open eyes and gave a crisp nod. "Sergeant Harris," she said, "welcome back to the land of the living. The medics weren't sure you'd make it. The Krell poison was something new. Our researchers are quite interested." She spoke, matter-of-factly, but relief showed in her eyes. Jack tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Foster offered him water, helping him drink through a straw. She informed him that Sam and Olivia had survived the mission. Reinforcements had arrived just in time. The mining facility remained under Alliance control, a small victory in the larger war. As days passed, and Jack recovered his strength, he received news that shocked him. His transfer request had been approved. He was being reassigned to the Refugee Protection Fleet, specifically to the colony where Lyra and other Nalari refugees had been settled. Major Foster delivered the news personally, the kind of request rarely granted to soldiers with your combat experience. Foster said her expression. Curious, Jack didn't explain. He simply accepted the transfer orders with quiet gratitude. Perhaps the universe did have patterns, as Lyra believed. 2 weeks later, Jack boarded a transport vessel. His wounds had healed, though the medical officer warned he would carry new scars. He carried few possessions. His military issue bag contained little beyond necessities. Sam and Olivia saw him off with mixed emotions. Sad to lose a teammate, but happy for his evident anticipation. The journey to the refugee colony took 4 days. Jack spent the time reviewing information about his new assignment. The colony orbited a peaceful world with 2 moons. The settlement housed refugees from 12 different species affected by the Krell expansion. His role would be security coordinator, ensuring the safety of over 3,000 displaced beings. He also studied Nalari culture, determined to understand Lyra's people better. The Nalari were an ancient species with rich traditions in art, music, and philosophy. Before the Krell invasion, they had been known as diplomats and scholars, rarely engaging in warfare. Their peaceful nature had made them vulnerable when the Krell attacked. Jack wondered how Lyra had adapted to life in the colony. She had been a translator for the Krell, privy to sensitive information. Her knowledge of enemy operations could be valuable to Alliance intelligence. He hoped she hadn't faced suspicion or interrogation. She had suffered enough. The refugee colony came into view as the transport approached, nestled on the largest of 3 artificial platforms orbiting the planet. It looked like a small city. Domed structures and interconnected buildings spread across the platform, with green spaces scattered between them. The design incorporated elements from multiple cultures, creating a unique aesthetic. Jack felt his heart rate increase as the transport docked. His palms were sweaty, a reaction he hadn't experienced before combat in years. He chided himself for acting like a lovesick teenager. Yet he couldn't deny the anticipation that had built during the journey. The docking procedure completed with a gentle shudder. Jack gathered his bag and joined the line of new arrivals. Alliance personnel technicians and supply officers mostly. The transport had brought needed equipment and specialists to support the growing colony. As Jack stepped onto the colony for the first time, he breathed recycled air tinged with unfamiliar scents. The arrival area buzzed with activity beings of various species moved with purpose. Security officers checked credentials directing newcomers to appropriate areas. Jack presented his transfer orders to a bored-looking officer, who barely glanced at them before pointing him toward the security headquarters. Jack shouldered his bag and began walking through the colony, taking in his new home. The structures were simple but clean. A place of new beginnings for those who had lost everything. White corridors opened occasionally into gathering spaces where refugees. Socialized gardens featuring plants from multiple worlds added color and life to the artificial environment. He had not told Lyra he was coming. The communication system between military vessels and refugee colonies was unreliable at best. He wondered if she still thought of him, if the connection they had formed had faded with distance and time. They sat in a small garden area within the Nalari section of the colony. The space was designed to mimic a traditional Nalari meditation garden, with flowing water and plants with luminescent leaves. Jack listened as Lyra told him about her life in the colony since her arrival. 3 months had passed quickly for her, filled with adjustments and new connections. She had found other survivors from her home city, including a former teacher who had recognized her immediately. The Nalari community welcomed her with rituals of homecoming, though their true home was lost forever. They shared memories and traditions, keeping their culture alive in exile. Lyra worked as a cultural liaison, helping newcomers adjust to life in the colony. Her gift for languages made her invaluable as refugees continued to arrive from Krell-controlled territories. She had begun teaching Nalari music to children born in the colony, ensuring the next generation would know their heritage. Jack shared his own story. In turn, the battles since their parting, his injury and unexpected transfer. He downplayed the danger he had faced, but Lyra seemed to understand the parts he left unspoken. Her eyes lingered on the way he occasionally touched his side where new scars marked his brush with death. As darkness fell, artificial lights illuminated the garden, casting soft shadows. Lyra explained that the colony followed the day and night cycle of the planet below, though they were separated from it by vacuum and distance. The moons were visible through the domed ceiling above them, their light adding a silvery glow to the scene. We should prepare for the evening meal, Lyra said eventually, rising gracefully from her seat. Communal dining is important to my people. Will you join us, Jack? Nodded, feeling both honored and slightly nervous at the prospect of meeting her community. He followed as she led the way to a large gathering space where tables were arranged in concentric circles. The Nalari dining hall hummed with conversation as they entered. Beings with blue skin in various shades moved about, setting tables and bringing food from a central kitchen area. The aroma was unfamiliar, but pleasant, spicy, and sweet. Simultaneously, Lyra guided Jack to a table near the center where several older Nalari sat. These are our elders, Lyra explained, indicating the group with respect. The eldest among them, a female with pale, almost white-blue skin and silver hair that had faded to white, nodded to Jack. Her large eyes held wisdom and sorrow in equal measure. This is Elder Mira, Lyra continued. She was a member of the High Council on Nilar before the invasion. Jack bowed respectfully, using the gesture Lyra had taught him on their walk to the dining hall. Elder Mira studied him with interest. We have heard of you, human, she said, her voice carrying the same musical quality as Lyra's, though age had added a raspy undertone. The one who saved our Lyra from darkness. Other Nalari joined the table, younger, adults and several children. Their curious eyes fixed on Jack, making him self-conscious. He was clearly the only human present. He wondered how often they interacted with species other than their own, within the segregated sections of the colony. The meal began with a ritual. Thanksgiving Nalari around the room raised their hands, palms upward, and chanted softly. Lyra translated quietly for Jack. They thank the universe for sustenance and remember those who cannot share the meal. She explained. The ritual creates connection between all Nalari wherever they may be. The food was served in communal dishes placed at the center of each table. The Nalari used utensils similar to spoons, but with prongs on one side, allowing them to both scoop and spear food items. Jack followed Lyra's example, trying each dish with cautious enthusiasm. Some flavors were strange to his human palate, but others were deliciously familiar. Throughout the meal, conversation flowed freely. Elder Mira asked Jack about Earth and his home place. The other Nalari listened with interest as he described the Midwestern United States with its open spaces and changing seasons. He told them about his childhood on a farm, the animals he had cared for, and the crops his family had grown. In turn, the Nalari shared stories of Nalar. Jack learned that their cities had indeed floated among the clouds, tethered to the ground by massive cables made of living crystal. The Nalari had evolved in harmony with their environment, developing technology that worked with nature rather than against it. Their peaceful society had been unprepared for the Krell aggression. As the meal concluded, Jack noticed Lyra watching him, her expression thoughtful. He wondered what she was thinking, how she perceived him among her people. Did he seem as alien to her as she had first seemed to him on the Krell ship? The thought troubled him, though he could not have explained why. After dinner, Lyra walked Jack back toward the Alliance section of the colony. The corridors were quieter now as the artificial night cycle progressed. Most residents had retired to their quarters, but a few moved about on various errands. Jack and Lyra walked slowly, neither eager for the day to end. "You made a good impression," Lyra said. Breaking the comfortable silence, Elder Mira rarely speaks directly to outsiders. Jack felt unreasonably pleased by this information. "It matters to you what they think of me," he observed. Lyra nodded. "Of course," she replied. "They are my people, what remains of my home. Their approval means much to me." They paused at the boundary between the Nalari section and the main corridor. Jack knew he should continue to his quarters alone, but hesitated. Her company felt right in, a way few things had since the war began. Lyra seemed equally reluctant to part. She touched his arm lightly, her fingers cool against his skin. "Will I see you tomorrow?" she asked. Jack explained his duty schedule as security coordinator. His first shift would end by midday. Would she be free then? Lyra smiled and nodded. "I will find you," she promised. Then with a quick, graceful movement, she leaned up and pressed her cheek to his, a traditional Nalari farewell between close friends. Before Jack could respond, she turned and walked away, her silver hair catching the light as she disappeared back into her section. Jack returned to his quarters, his mind full of the day he had come to the colony, hoping to see Lyra again, but uncertain what would follow. He had not expected the immediate connection that remained between them, nor the welcome from her community. He removed the crystal pendant from his pocket and placed it on the small shelf beside his bed. A piece of her world, now part of his. The next morning, Jack reported for duty at the security headquarters. Commander Nash assigned him to patrol the central marketplace, an area where all species mingled to trade goods and services. The marketplace represented the heart of the colony, a neutral ground where differences were set aside in favor of mutual benefit. Jack moved through the bustling space, observing the interactions between refugees of different species. Human merchants sold earth goods at premium prices, while Arcosian traders offered technology salvaged from abandoned outposts. Centaurian healers provided services to any who could pay their fee. Nalari artisans displayed delicate crystal sculptures and woven textiles. The diversity reminded Jack of why the Alliance fought against the Krell. These beings from across the galaxy, each with unique cultures and abilities, enriched the universe. Their differences created strength rather than weakness. The Krell, with their drive toward conquest and conformity, would destroy this vibrant tapestry. As midday approached, Jack completed his patrol and headed to the central garden, a meeting place he had suggested to Lyra via message that morning. The garden featured plants from multiple worlds, creating an interesting Blend of colors and scents, Jack found a bench near a small fountain and sat down to wait. He did not wait long. Lyra appeared wearing the blue uniform of a colony administrator. The color matched her skin, giving her an ethereal appearance as she moved through dappled light. Her hair was arranged in a simpler style today, practical for her work duties. She smiled when she saw him, and Jack felt something shift inside him. A recognition of how much her smile had come to mean. They shared a quick meal from a nearby food stall, Lyra choosing familiar Nalari cuisine while Jack opted for something resembling a sandwich. She told him about her morning helping a newly arrived family adjust to colony life. He described his patrol and observations of the marketplace. Their conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years rather than days. Jack reluctantly returned to duty, promising to meet Lyra again the following day. Thus began a pattern that would continue for weeks. Jack and Lyra meeting whenever their schedules allowed, exploring the colony together, learning about each other and the diverse community around them. Jack found himself watching the clock during his shifts, eager for them to end so he could see Lyra. Again, he learned to recognize the subtle changes in her expressions. The slight tilt of her head when she was curious. The way her eyes narrowed when she was thinking deeply. The particular smile that seemed reserved only for him. He introduced her to his fellow security officers, including his new team members, Keith Davis, a veteran with a scar running down his face, and Laura Chen, a young recruit with keen observational skills. They accepted Lyra with friendly curiosity, asking about Nalari customs and teaching her human expressions, and slang. Lyra brought Jack deeper into the Nalari community, introducing him to artists, musicians, and scholars who had survived the Krell invasion. He learned to appreciate the complex harmonies of Nalari music and the symbolic meanings in their art. Elder Mira began greeting him by name when they met, a sign of acceptance that Lyra assured him was significant. 6 months passed in the peaceful rhythm of colony life. Jack and Lyra grew closer with each passing day. Their different backgrounds sometimes created misunderstandings, but these were quickly resolved with patience and communication. Jack learned to recognize the subtle nuances of Nalari expressions, while Lyra studied human customs with enthusiastic curiosity. Jack received occasional messages from his former team. Sam and Olivia continued to serve on the front lines. Their communications were brief, often heavily censored by Alliance security, but conveyed enough to let Jack know they remained alive and fighting. He shared these messages with Lyra, who had grown fond of his friends through his stories. The colony expanded as more refugees arrived. Ships brought survivors from newly liberated planets, beings who had suffered under Krell occupation and now sought safety and community. Jack coordinated security for these arrivals, ensuring they were properly processed and settled. Lyra often served as translator when new Nalari joined the colony. Their shared work brought them together in meaningful ways. One morning, as Jack completed his early patrol, a priority communication arrived from Alliance Command. The message was brief, but its implications enormous. Krell forces had suffered a major defeat in the Arcturus sector. Their main fleet scattered, their supply lines disrupted. For the first time in years, the Alliance had gained significant advantage in the war. The news spread quickly through the colony. Celebrations erupted spontaneously in communal areas. Beings who had lost homes and loved ones to the Krell dared to hope for eventual victory. Jack watched the celebrations with mixed emotions, relief that the war might end sooner than expected. Pride in the Alliance achievement, concern for what might follow. Military experience had taught him that desperate enemies often became more dangerous. He found Lyra in the Nalari Communication Center, where she was helping translate the news for elders who had not yet learned the Alliance common language. Her eyes shone with cautious hope when she saw him. They shared a brief embrace before stepping outside to speak privately. "Do you think this could be the beginning of the end?" she asked as they walked through a quiet corridor. Jack considered the question carefully. He had seen too many promising offensives falter to make easy predictions. "It's a significant victory," he acknowledged. "But the Krell still control substantial territory. They won't surrender easily." Lyra nodded, accepting his assessment. She had experienced Krell determination firsthand. Their pride would not allow them to accept defeat gracefully. Still, she could not help feeling hopeful. Perhaps in my lifetime I might see Nalar again, she said softly. Not as it was, but free. Jack squeezed her hand gently, sharing her dream, though he knew the reality would be more complicated. Worlds ravaged by Krell occupation would require decades to recover. That evening, a formal celebration was organized in the central gathering space. Alliance officials delivered speeches about sacrifice and perseverance. Refugees shared stories of survival. Representatives from each species performed. Traditional music or dances, a defiant expression of cultures the Krell had sought to destroy. Jack stood at the perimeter, monitoring security. While he remained vigilant, his eyes frequently sought Lyra in the crowd. She sat with the Nalari elders, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style signifying hope according to their tradition. When their eyes met across the room, she smiled, a private expression meant only for him. After the official celebration concluded, smaller gatherings continued. Throughout the colony, Jack completed his security duties, then joined Lyra and a mixed group of Nalari and humans in one of the garden areas. Someone had brought musical instruments, and impromptu performances created a festive atmosphere. Drinks, where shared food appeared from various quarters. The barriers between species seemed less significant in this moment of shared joy. As the artificial night cycle advanced, the gathering gradually dispersed. Jack and Lyra remained sitting close together, on a bench beneath flowering vines. Their conversation flowed from the day's events to more personal matters. Lyra spoke of her hopes for the future. Jack listened, feeling a strange tension between happiness and uncertainty. The war has defined us. Both, she observed, her perceptive eyes studying his face. What will we become in peace? The question struck deeper than she perhaps intended. Jack had been a soldier for so long, he sometimes struggled to imagine another life. Yet here in the colony, he had begun to discover other aspects of himself. Teacher, protector, builder. Before Jack could respond, the peace was shattered. An alarm blared throughout the colony. Red emergency lights flashed in corridors and common areas. Jack was immediately alert. Recognizing the signal for possible hostile approach, he activated his comm unit connecting to security headquarters. The voice of Commander Nash came through. Clipped and professional, unidentified vessels approaching defensive positions, all. Security personnel report immediately. Jack turned to Lyra, knowing he must leave her. The celebration had ended. They were once again soldier and refugee. Whatever had been building between them must wait. He saw understanding in her eyes alongside. Fear not for herself, but for him. Be careful, she said, simply touching his face with cool fingers before he hurried away. The security center was already bustling with activity when Jack arrived. Screens displayed approaching vessels. Their configuration, unfamiliar. Commander Nash stood at the central console coordinating response. 5 ships, she reported as Jack joined her. Not Alliance, not identified trading vessels. They refuse communication and maintain course directly toward the colony defensive. Protocols engaged automatically. Alliance patrol ships moved to intercept the unknown vessels. Colony shields powered up to maximum strength. Civilians were directed to designated shelter areas. Jack organized security teams, positioning them at strategic points throughout the colony. His training took over, pushing personal concerns aside. The first impacts came 20 minutes later. The colony shuddered as something struck the outer shields. Alarms intensified. Commander Nash received reports from Alliance patrols. The unidentified vessels had opened fire. Their weapon signature identified them as Krell, though their ship design was unconventional. Jack thought quickly. The Krell main fleet had been defeated, but these could be remnants. Desperate, perhaps seeking revenge on symbolic targets. The refugee colony represented everything. The Krell opposed freedom, diversity, survival. He moved through the colony, ensuring evacuation procedures ran smoothly, directing civilians toward inner sections, where protection was strongest. His thoughts turned to Lyra. He had not seen her since the alarm sounded. The Nalari section was far from the security center. She would be following evacuation protocols, helping elders and children reach safety. He forced himself to focus on his duties, trusting she would do the same. The colony defenses held against the initial assault. Alliance patrol ships engaged the attackers, drawing fire away from the vulnerable habitat. 3 hours passed in tense watchfulness. Occasional impacts shook the structure as stray shots penetrated the outer defensive perimeter. Reports indicated 2 enemy vessels disabled the others, continuing their attack with increasing desperation. Jack maintained his position at a key junction, coordinating civilian movement and security response. His team secured access points, watching for any sign of boarding attempts should the outer defenses fail. The faces of refugees passing through his checkpoint showed fear, but also determination. These people had survived loss before. They would survive again. A communication from Commander Nash alerted security teams to a new development. One Krell vessel had broken through the Alliance patrol line and was attempting to dock at an emergency airlock on the colony's lower level. Jack immediately redirected his team, moving quickly through maintenance corridors toward the threatened area. They arrived as the airlock mechanism engaged. Jack positioned his team with tactical precision weapons, ready should the Krell breach the airlock. They would face immediate resistance. He activated the internal defense system, sealing adjacent corridors to contain any intrusion. The civilians had been evacuated from this section, but Jack knew the Krell might carry weapons capable of breaching internal barriers. The airlock cycled open with a hydraulic hiss. Jack tensed, ready for combat. What emerged, however, was not the expected Krell assault force. A single figure stumbled through the doorway, humanoid, but clearly injured. Green blood seeped from multiple wounds. The being collapsed to the deck before Jack could issue commands. Cautiously, weapons still raised, Jack approached the fallen figure. Recognition dawned slowly. The injured being was not Krell but Arcosian, a species known for their technical skills and resistance to Krell rule. Jack signaled the medic on his team, who moved forward to assess the wounded alien. The Arcosian regained consciousness as the medic worked, gasping words. In broken Alliance common escaped. They said Krell laboratory ship stolen. Others behind Jack understood immediately. The approaching vessels were not Krell hunters but escaped prisoners using stolen Krell ships. The attacks were desperate attempts to reach safety, pursued by actual Krell forces. Jack relayed this information to Commander Nash, who immediately adjusted response protocols. The remaining vessels were redirected to proper docking facilities. Alliance patrol ships formed a defensive perimeter anticipating Krell pursuit. The colony shields reconfigured to allow controlled access while maintaining protection.